If you're watching Hidden Histories WWII, you already know this channel exists to go beyond surface-level explanations. And before we go any further, make sure you subscribe now, because this is one of those topics that rewards slow thinking, repeated listening, and deep study. What really started World War II was not a single gunshot in 1939, not Hitler alone, and certainly not one treaty. It was a long chain of decisions, fears, economic pressures, and moral failures stretching back to 1918. If you miss that chain, you miss the war itself. Why the end of World War I planted the seeds of the next global conflict. When the guns fell silent in 1918, Europe was exhausted but not healed. The Treaty of Versailles did not end conflict. It froze resentment into law. Germany was blamed entirely for the war, stripped of territory, limited militarily, and crushed with reparations that were economically unrealistic. This wasn't punishment designed to stabilize Europe. It was punishment designed to humiliate. For historians and survival-minded thinkers, this is a lesson in what happens when peace agreements ignore long-term consequences. A defeated population that cannot rebuild will eventually look for someone who promises restoration, order, and revenge. This is exactly what happened in Germany during the 1920s. How economic collapse became political radicalization. The Weimar Republic inherited impossible conditions. Hyperinflation destroyed savings, pensions, and trust in institutions. By 1923, money was almost meaningless. Families burned banknotes for heat. This matters because, well, extreme economic stress breaks social contracts faster than ideology ever could. When the Great Depression hit in 1929, it finished what Versailles started. Millions were unemployed, governments looked powerless, and extremist movements gained legitimacy by offering certainty. For practical application, this is why historians and survivalists study economic warning signs. When currencies collapse and unemployment spikes, political moderation collapses with them. Germany was not uniquely evil. It was uniquely desperate. Why fascism spread beyond Germany and normalized aggression. Germany was not alone. Italy under Mussolini had already shown that authoritarian nationalism could mobilize mass support. Japan, facing resource shortages and population pressure, embraced militarism as a survival strategy. These regimes did not see expansion as immoral. They saw it as necessary. The League of Nations failed to stop early aggressions because it had no enforcement power and no unity. When Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935, the world protested but did nothing meaningful. The lesson here is simple and, well, brutal. When aggression is tolerated once, it becomes a precedent. This pattern repeats across history, and understanding it helps explain why deterrence matters more than diplomacy alone. How appeasement trained dictators to expect surrender. You see, appeasement was not born from stupidity. It came from trauma. Britain and France remembered the slaughter of the First World War and would do almost anything to avoid another war. Hitler understood this fear better than anyone, you know. Each time he violated the Treaty of Versailles, rearming Germany, remilitarizing the Rhineland, annexing Austria, the response was negotiation instead of resistance. The Munich Agreement in 1938 was, well, the final proof to Hitler that the West would not fight. For serious historians, this is a case study in strategic miscalculation. When a threat repeatedly tests boundaries and faces no consequences, escalation becomes, frankly, inevitable. In practical terms, whether studying geopolitics or personal security, boundaries without enforcement invite disaster. Why ideology mattered, but opportunity mattered more. Nazi ideology was central, but ideology alone does not start wars. Opportunity does. Poland, caught between Germany and the Soviet Union, was strategically doomed once the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was signed. That agreement shocked the world because it revealed what many ignored. Ideological enemies will cooperate if it serves their interests. This is a critical insight for anyone studying power dynamics. Principles often collapse under pressure. Interests rarely do. How the failure of collective security sealed Europe's fate. By 1939, war was no longer avoidable, because the systems meant to prevent it had already failed. The League of Nations had no teeth. Democracies were divided and inward-looking. The United States remained isolationist. Smaller nations learned they could not rely on international guarantees. When Germany invaded Poland, it wasn't the beginning of the war in a meaningful sense. It was the final confirmation that the post-1918 world order was dead. For historians, this really underscores why international systems must be backed by real power. And for survivalists, it's a reminder that relying solely on external protection is, well, a gamble. The years between 1918 and 1939 show that wars are processes, not just isolated events. They begin when grievances are ignored, when economic systems collapse, when aggressors are rewarded with concessions, and when fear, honestly, overrides responsibility. Applying this knowledge means watching early indicators, not just waiting for formal declarations. It means understanding that stability requires fairness, strength and accountability, all at the same time. History doesn't repeat mechanically, but, you know, it rhymes with precision. If this deep dive gave you new perspective rather than recycled talking points, subscribe to Hidden Histories WWII, share this with someone who takes history seriously, and, well, keep digging beneath the surface. The real lessons of World War II are not just about the past. They are warnings written in advance.